Hello, Martínez de Rituerto with El País from Spain. Hello. A question, it's been spoken lengthily about the solidarity in NATO, just in the same week that the Spanish government has unilaterally announced that it's withdrawing its troops from Kosovo. Do you think that this is an example that could be followed by other people acting unilaterally with these troops, moving troops from one place to the other without consulting with the allies? And the Spanish government is now saying this very weekend that there was a problem of communication, that the allies have been informed about the reasons of this withdrawal, and that everybody is happy now with what is going on and what is going to happen. Are you happy with this decision and the evolution of the whole incident, if you are, of course, aware of it? Thank you.
I was only aware of it after it was reported. Not to be specific about this issue, but let's take the analogy of a house on fire and a volunteer fire department with 2 fire trucks and 20 people. When the trucks arrive and they are attempting to contain the fire, save the house, and save the neighborhood, you can't have the 20 fire department people decide to peel off when they feel like it. When you are there at the mission, you are meant to do the mission. And you have to cede some of your self-interest and some of your sense of individualism to the collective. And that is why Article 5 is so important. This cannot be a question of taking attendance about who's going to show up at the moment that Article 5 is invoked. You have to know that the collective will be arriving. And so I say, not specific to this particular incident, but as just one of 26 going to 28, when the bell rings, everyone is meant to show up. And this cannot be voluntary. This has got to be something that is taken for what it's meant to be, which is everybody show up when you're meant to show up. And we can work the details out about what the division of labor is going to be, but at the same time that you're meant to show up, you can't peel off when you feel like it either.
And I think it's a very apt analogy. I think NATO is very much like a global fire brigade, and we do have the collective responsibilities. And not only do we have different responsibilities at various times in these missions, we sometimes have to share in the more difficult tasks. That means, yes, some people drive the trucks and carry the hoses, but we have to have all of the 26 at various times ready to run in and fight the flames and save the people. And we also have to rank in priority where the fires are and how we contain them. So I'll leave that analogy aside for now, but I would say this. If we just had a very interesting discussion about NATO, and if we weren't discussing how to modernize and improve and be more inclusive and look at new ideas, if we weren't having that discussion, we would be having a discussion about how to invent NATO, because this is the most critical organization at the most critical time, certainly in my lifetime. What's happening in Afghanistan, what's indicative of the insurgency there and future insurgencies demands that NATO continue to modernize, be flexible, look for new capabilities, and when certain countries make decisions, at a minimum, I think there has to be notice. Consultation is preferred, but the notice so that everyone knows what the implications will be. Because when we're involved in a collective mission, you have to know who has your back, who's keeping the air hoses going, who's doing those critical enablers and supports. So I think mutual respect within the alliance certainly demands and dictates that level of communication and cooperation about what the various roles will be.
Gerald Loftus, Jim Nugger, an American blogger here in Brussels. Question, and taking advantage of the presence of Canada and the United States here, when you hear discussion of NATO branching out into areas like Arctic, high north security, cybersecurity, energy security, etc. There is some discussion in certain fora about transatlantic relations taking another form, that NATO may not be the best forum for that kind of discussion because you have financial discussions, etc. So what is your take on that, bringing these subjects into NATO?
Well, I think that in the end, the basic parts of NATO have to be working and be relevant and be credible and dependable in order for it to move into other spheres. But it is very clear to me that cyber, certainly Estonia, one of our allies, was attacked and could be attacked again. Energy security clearly has played a part in destabilizing by Russia recently. Certainly the Georgia situation, what happened about 17 months ago with gas lines being refurbished and turned off. So I think that what we have to do is take stock of what our capabilities are for what we would call conventional missions, make sure that we still are applying ourselves and that we have the full range of capabilities and that we have the ability to deal with those missions. But I think that because we are living in an asymmetrical world where threats are coming at us in many different forms, NATO needs to be, the force needs to step up and be prepared to deal with those. Some of those are going to be done, perhaps, the only analogy I have is like net jets. Not everybody has to do some of these things. Not everyone has to have all of those capabilities at this time. We can, through capabilities, assessments, and other things, decide, for example, not every country needs 3 or 4 C-17s, but we need C-17s. Not every country needs helicopters, but we need helicopters. Not everybody needs to be able to deal with chemical and biological and nuclear terrorism, but we need those capabilities. So inside the collective of 26 going to 28, we can burden share by having different countries specialize, either individually or in a group, specialize in those capabilities, help themselves get to a level of burden sharing by having a speciality that they actually can deliver to the collective, and then work on making sure that we are covered now for what the new emerging threats are. That takes planning, it takes investment, it takes narrative. It takes a narrative to make clear to the publics and parliaments back at home why these are important new investments, why these are things that are important for the alliance to become capable in. And, you know, I think that when you look at North America, we are very, very interested in making sure, because of the distances and the geography, that our forward deployed troops and our assets that are in Europe, where the rest of our alliance is, that we can't move a lot of things very quickly, that there are assets here that we can put to bear and will hold at risk and deter whatever we need to deter, even though we might be far away.
Just, if I can just very briefly touch on this as well. I mean, the short answer from a Canadian perspective, and we have a tremendous working relationship at a military level, at an economic level. There are other forums, quite frankly, to deal with climate change. Climate change should not be high on the priority list of NATO. It's a military alliance. Now, I think the previous discussion touched on the fact that the Arctic and the waters in the Northwest Passage and parts of the Arctic are opening up, which creates a new dynamic and perhaps a new security threat, and we need to build that into the security architecture of what's happening and the changing threat assessment, piracy, cyber threats, all of that. But, you know, we have NORAD when it comes to North America, so that's a separate forum. We have our NAFTA agreement to talk about economic issues. We have other issues to deal with the climate and international conferences to boot. But when it comes to ranking the priorities and most importantly dealing with them, that's NATO's forum. When it comes to the military capacity, the military operations, having that ability to back up the talk and to be able to protect, project, share those common values democracy and the rule of law and human rights. We share that not just with the United States, we share that with the 26 in NATO. And we want to continue to see that we're keeping those priorities straight and actually being a force for good on those files. And Afghanistan has to be given top priority for reasons that I'm sure you're very familiar.
Jim Luger from Bloomberg. I'm over here in this corner. Just wanted to ask Minister MacKay about your career plans, whether you have any expectation of moving to Brussels on or about August 1st, or if you think that honor is more likely to go to Mr. Rasmussen, and if the Congresswoman from her contacts with the administration could perhaps shed some light on who the U.S. would like to see as the next Secretary General.
Well, look, I learned quite some time ago not to have expectations in politics. And I'll answer it this way. I have a tremendous amount of work to do with the Canadian Forces rebuilding effort that we've undertaken in a very ambitious way. We have our Canada First Defense strategy. We're upping our game as far as our military capabilities to do the work both at home and abroad. And Canada, by virtue of being a 60-year founding nation participant in NATO, is of course very interested in all aspects of NATO, including the leadership. And that's why we've been so engaged and will continue to be engaged beyond this period of time, beyond this mission. Canada is looking to the future, and this is why we've put in place a 20-year rebuilding plan for our Canadian Forces. On subjects such as this, I'm very focused at home, very focused when I come to these international gatherings, and very cognizant of the fact that the consensus at NATO and the collective security is what all countries have to continue to keep their eye on and ensure that NATO is up to the task.
And I learned a long time ago to let the administration speak for themselves. So I'm not sure. I have no intel on what the administration's position on a future Secretary General is. I will just say two things quickly. I'd like to salute Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, who I think has been an indefatigable, very wise and consensus-building leader for NATO over the last 5 years. And as a North American, I also want to make the second point that as a North American, that the Canadian Defense Minister is a star for us, and our bilateral relationship has been always very, very strong, but particularly very strong now with Peter MacKay as Defense Minister. And I just want to say that from the North American perspective in NATO, we find that we have a very, very strong and congruent relationship, and we're able to speak, I think, very forcefully because of the efforts of Minister MacKay.
Peter O'Neill, Can West News. Over here, Pete. Just as a follow-up to that, Minister MacKay, I wanted to know if the discussion of you being the next Secretary General, there was a report yesterday on the wires indicating that the U.S. in fact is going to support Rasmussen. I'm wondering if you think that this is a strong indication. Obama is looking to the future. He's trying to get Europe more deeply involved into NATO. Canada's pulling out in 2011 anyway. That the forces, the current towards a European Secretary General is just too strong for Canada to contend this time.
Well, Peter, to quote Joe Biden, I don't think anybody's nationality should be a bar to any position, whether it be NATO or any other organization. I want to take a moment to follow up on what Ellen has said about Jaap de Hoop Scheffer. I think he's shown tremendous leadership and vision for NATO. I think he has been an extremely positive force in the direction that NATO's taken, and whoever succeeds him is going to have to continue along that path, whether it be at NATO headquarters, whether it be issues related to expansion, the capabilities and modernization, the shared assets that are very much a part of the future of NATO. As far as how the decision is made, that again is done very much by consensus and internally. I read reports, I read newspaper accounts. I'm not going to get drawn into the speculation. I'll leave that to others. All I can say is that Canada is a strong contributor, and I think that the fact that our nation is even being considered speaks mainly to the efforts of our armed forces. And I really salute their tremendous sacrifice and their tremendous commitment, professionalism, courage, and I include their families in that. And that's true of all our military participants. I think it's so important at this time. NATO is that protective line that runs around the globe, and there's no second defense. That to me is so critically important that people understand, and that we continue to communicate that to our populations everywhere, that the job they're doing allows people to sleep at night. It allows them to carry on with their daily lives. And we can never spend enough time paying tribute to the work of the soldiers.
Just a quick follow-up. More big losses for Canada in Afghanistan. You've been here before talking about burden sharing. Are you becoming skeptical that Europe is going to come through with the kind of troops and forces and finances that Canada and the U.S. have been asking?
Well, I continue to be an optimist, and I look at recent events, the return of France, new administration in the United States, ascendancy of other countries, recognition of the necessity of joined-up approach, and the reality that countries, I think, more and more are recognizing that there are roles specific to their country and capabilities that will contribute to success in Afghanistan. And how do we define success? Well, a country that's no longer in the grip of a terrorist organization, girls able to go to school, construction happening of roads and water systems and irrigation, immunization that's saving lives. All of those individual successes at a human level, to me, show that this mission has been moving in the right direction. We just need to do more of it, and we need to draw more people into the effort. I suspect that President Obama, Prime Minister Harper, other leaders will continue to make those points forcefully at the upcoming summit. And I think we need to continue to embrace this recognition of solidarity of alliance and the fact that this particular mission has to succeed. And each of us has a role to play in that, and each of us has to dig a little deeper and try to identify what that contribution can be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this will have to be the last one.
I'll be quick. I have a question for you, Madam. Success in Afghanistan is sorry, I'm from Danish TV. My name is Mette Fugel. Success in Afghanistan is a must. Does that not mean that the next Secretary General must be able to communicate with the Islamic world?
Do you mean by speaking a language, or do you mean by...
Well, there is one of the so-called candidates, the Danish Prime Minister, who has had a cartoon crisis, Denmark has created a cartoon crisis, and Mr. Rasmussen is not very well liked in some parts of the Islamic world. So if NATO is going to succeed in Afghanistan, doesn't it take a Secretary General that is able to talk to the Islamic world, that is respected in the Islamic world?
Well, I will say this. When we were inside, I made clear that one of my concerns is that we need a narrative to speak to publics and parliaments, not only of NATO countries but the world writ large, as to what is important in Afghanistan, why the mission in Afghanistan is important, why NATO is there, why individually the countries that are members of NATO need to make their contributions and need to be steadfast, and why the world should be supporting the mission in Afghanistan. You know, it does have a UN mandate. So I will not speak specifically about one candidate or another. My guess is that all of these things are being taken into consideration. But I do believe that whoever ascends to the Secretary General job at NATO has a big burden to make sure that we have a narrative about the mission in Afghanistan, and to begin to make sure that publics and parliaments around the world understand exactly why this is so very, very important, and why we have a UN mandate, and why we have all of these NATO nations participating.